Meeting to order. Seeing no public comment, we'll move right into action items. The first one being approval of the January 22nd minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are you guys
Aye.
technical hold? Okay.
Yeah. One technical hold.
IT. Okay,
It's a
that
violation.
passed unanimously. And then we're on to the Advantage Pinellas Transit Plan. Heather, the floor is yours.
All right, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, so you will notice this is titled Advantage Pinellas Transit. Thank you.
You're going to show this next week? The same?
Yeah, at the board meeting and at the MPO.
I would just, I would suggest changing to a darker background color because it's hard to see that.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's a template, but I can make the words black.
yeah, that'll be better.
Yeah, black. Better.
Yeah, I could do that. Okay, so anyway, this is at the state level called the Transit Development Plan. We have, for the first time ever, co-branded this with the Forward Pinellas Long-Range Transportation Plan, and that is because the Long-Range Transportation Plan, which is a 25-year lookout, is, and then the TDP is 10 years. So the Long-Range Transportation Plan includes basically our transit plan for the first 10 years, and then they add additional things in their vision plan beyond that. At the TDP, which we're calling Advantage Pinellas Transit, is a 10-year plan. We update it every 5 years, what's called a major update, and then in interim years, we do a progress report to share with the DOT progress we've made on all of our implementation plan items. This, as I mentioned, does provide the foundation for the first 10 years of the LRTP, and then it's also coordinated with TBARTA's long-range plan, the regional master plan. So within the plan basically requires a bunch of elements, which effectively are things we already do. So we like to say it's mandating good planning. And so I'm going to go through each of the required elements, but you will see how they are very clearly tied to other things you've seen in the past. So the mission and goals section is based on our scorecard. And so we have these categories that we have goals kind of surrounding, and that's community support, financial stability, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and commitment to performance. And then it also includes public outreach. So we look at all the public outreach we do. We look at the outreach we did for the community bus plan, which was pretty extensive. And then we did operator focus groups so we can hear what they're seeing. We did CSR focus groups, again, so we can hear what they hear from the customers. And then we had a number of community events and outreach at the transit centers where we had this Get On Board game where we talked to a lot of riders and some general community members about, we gave them 10 fake dollars and said, how would you allocate these dollars to different improvements to the transit system? And then we also took a look at the Advantage Pinellas public outreach, which is a lot more broad in terms of the community and the people they reach out to. And we do hear some different things based on what our riders are looking for and what the general community, a lot of whom don't ride the bus, are looking for. And some of those differences are that the general community talks a little bit more about things like express bus, rapid transit, and those kind of things. And then our riders tell us, and this is kind of the same thing we hear all the time, but that they do want more frequent service. That's their number one request. Later evening service, more weekend service, and faster, more direct routes. Those are the top. And so when we make recommendations on service improvements, we do take into account these requests, and you'll see that later. We did an onboard survey, which was a statistically valid survey in March and April of 2018, because we wanted to capture kind of the spring break visitor market as well. And there's a lot of information in our onboard survey data. It tells where people go to and from, the types of trips they're making, what routes they transfer from, if they made a transfer. But I just pulled out some of what I thought was interesting information to share. And the number one thing I thought was interesting is that for our fixed route service, over 40% of all the trips are between home and work. And then 64% of our fixed route riders are using PSTA at least 5 days a week, which is kind of consistent with those work trips. And not on here, but over 60% of our riders are employed either full or part-time, with full being the most. Our trolley, we do get a different rider profile because it is attracting those visitors. We have the UPass programs with some hotels, and they can use their room keys to ride for free. And then we also just have visitors in general that enjoy riding the trolley buses. And so for that, we see that 35% of all those trips are for recreation and sightseeing. So we're definitely capturing that visitor market. And then another point of interest is that about 30% of those trolley riders said they'd use a TNC, Uber, or Lyft, or they wouldn't make the trip at all. So you'd either have more cars on the road or less people spending money locally, most likely. Yes?
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure.
Because I saw this presentation last night at the track. If you look at the trolley, did that include the Jolly Trolley as well?
Yes. It was Jolly Trolley, Looper, Suncoast Beach Trolley, and the Cat.
Is the Cat 46.4% of all trolley rides, and therefore those are the people that live in Pinellas County?
I can look up that data. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Did you put that on there because you thought that was really high or low?
What? Which
That
one?
46% of trolley riders are from Pinellas County.
That would be.
Or are not Pinellas County riders.
Yeah.
Not,
Are not.
Or are
Pinellas
not
County riders.
Pinellas County.
Yeah,
That
so
means
that'd be tourists and people like
54%
that,
are.
huh?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
But the Cat and the Suncoast Beach Trolley were sampled probably at a higher rate than the Jolly Trolleys and the Loopers. And the Looper in particular, they didn't want us on board surveying riders because they didn't want to interrupt the tour that the operators give.
Uh-huh.
So we did that at locations where people board
Off the bus, off of.
on or off, yeah.
Okay.
Usually waiting to board.
Yeah.
And then we did, for trolleys, we also surveyed Saturdays. So we'd capture some weekend stuff.
but on the electric looper, we don't give a tour, our operators don't.
They give, I think, some basic information, but definitely,
Yeah, I've ridden them.
Okay.
it probably depends on the
Yeah,
operator.
but there's a lot of,
Uber guys do.
Brad and I have had a conversation about that, because we don't really control the looper. My wife and I have had excellent tour people, and some of the drivers, minimal and very unenthusiastic, or spoke softly, or,
Or incorrect.
yeah. So, is there some way we can kind of, since we're funding that, is there some way we can get some consistency on
I think
the tour
Bradford-
quality?
Bradford was addressing that. One of the
We have
operators.
tried, we've done
had
some
any-
scripts,
Yeah, yeah.
but some of the operators on the Looper just like to give a super
False
detailed
information.
tour. I rode it once and I was really surprised, how much detail they
Well,
were
yeah.
giving about buildings.
Yeah,
Well, the Vinoy is haunted with one of the operators.
yeah.
But they can also accept tips. So some of the drivers of the
Better
Looper.
entertaining there, I guess.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the Vinoy is not haunted? That was.
It's not, I don't believe it's
Yeah.
So you don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I just believed everything they told me when I was on it.
most tourists.
So another part of the analysis that's done in what's called the situational analysis is looking at peer transit agencies. And so our consultants selected some agencies that serve a similar population, run a similar number of hours and miles, and have many of these are mostly bus. So we have Columbus, Palm Tran, Louisville, Indianapolis, and Jacksonville, and we're the little red dash line in the middle. And so we basically just look to see that on a number of different metrics that we are not really below any of our peers. And so this is just one metric, and then there were many others, and it all tracked fine. And then we have to look at alternatives. So for this plan, we basically looked at a maintenance plan, which would maintain our existing services and include the Central Avenue BRT, which is obviously planned for. And then we looked at an optimal plan, which included a lot of those things that we hear from our riders in the community. And so it includes frequency and span improvements, new express routes, and then kind of a list of unfunded operating and capital priorities. And then obviously these are projects and things we could do if we had additional revenues. So our implementation plan, which is supposed to be for the next 10 years, is really based on our maintenance plan, because we don't have any new large source of funding identified at this point. And so it includes our BRT, it includes our Flamingo Fare, Smart Card, and Mobile Pay, and that's in beta testing now, and kind of important, along with that new fare system is our new fare policy, which includes fare capping, so kind of increases the equity for our riders. And then to continue our amenities program, and we do partner, and we're going to continue to partner with local jurisdictions on putting out more shelters, benches. The city of St. Petersburg has matched some of the shelters with us and are looking to do more citywide. They focus first on the Skyway Marina District, and they kind of use the shelters as part of their streetscape. And so sometimes they put a shelter out that didn't have that much ridership, but they paid for the full cost of that shelter. So now they're looking at how do we expand the shelters citywide, and they're not really looking at replacing shelters, but adding new shelters.
Good. Can I stop you? I've had a conversation with Brad about this. A lot of the municipalities have pulled out even benches. So there's places where people have to stand. We really need to kind of put our foot down as far as making sure that we've got benches as a minimum, but covered shelters where possible, because, you know, it rains around here, and
Right.
it hurts our ridership if people don't want to stand in the rain, you know. We need to make sure that we're providing adequate accommodation for people.
Right.
I don't know how we do that, because we have to beat up on each individual municipality, but do we have a committee or something like that that has contact with the local entities to make sure that we have a place for them to sit at least, or stand if possible, or, you know, be covered if possible?
Yeah, so the planning department often gets requests about those things, but we also have an amenities committee at PSTA that includes things like safety and security, project management, planning, facilities that review requests. But as far as the benches being pulled out, Metro Bench put out benches, and most of those have advertising. But in some cities that didn't have advertising, they went ahead and pulled those out because they're paying to maintain them and aren't getting any revenue. So we are looking at higher ridership stops that we could put amenities at. And aside from even like City of St. Petersburg program, PSTA has its own deployment plan. And so we are actively right now looking at county-wide where we can get new shelters. And now that we have a almost mature, I don't know, Office of Project Management, they are really taking a good or a strong role in helping us with locations that need an easement, that need some kind of higher level of construction. Because a lot of the high ridership stops, the reason they don't have a shelter is because it's not easy. It does require an easement, or it needs a lot of concrete work, and, you know, so those kind of things. But now we have an engineer on staff, and we have people that can really look at these stops and help us to deploy
How do
more.
we sort of prioritize? I mean, I know we don't have an infinite budget, and if this Metro Bench company bailed, then we have to sort of do this on our own. So how do we prioritize and work on within the budget that we have and so on?
By ridership is our number one way to prioritize, and then we look at the high ridership stops, look at if it, for example, can't get a shelter because the property owner won't give us an easement, we can perhaps put a bench there. Some of that is how we go through the projects. We also, a lot of cities have complete streets projects going on, or DOT has corridor studies that are leading into resurfacing. And so they often ask us if we would like to put a shelter there, and in some of those cases, they'll pour the concrete pad for us, which greatly reduces our cost. So we partner with those kind of projects as well. And then, of course, we look for like geographical equity when we're doing these shelter deployment plans.
Okay. All right. I just think that's important, you know, for our customers.
Certainly. And then the thing at the bottom of this list that we're focusing on a little more this year is to formalize our sustainability plan. We did recently get awarded kind of silver recognition from APTA but we'd like to work towards gold, and so we are going to be doing a more formal sustainability plan that includes all of our departments, and it's likely some initiatives will come out of that plan that are maybe lower cost that we can implement soon. Also in our implementation plan is continuation of our service partnerships. So as you all are aware, the trolleys, the Jolly Trolley includes funding from local jurisdictions, as does the Looper. And then I mentioned the DOT coordination. Local jurisdictions also request sometimes that developers put a shelter in, so we coordinate on that. And then the other kind of standard things we do. In terms of unfunded projects, and these are projects that as you know, we try to apply for grants for, we look for other revenue for, and are included on our state and federal legislative agendas, would be those new express routes, the frequency and span improvements, which when we were developing the optimal plan, we did, I would say, pretty significantly increase frequencies and span. Things like adding a lot more Sunday service. We don't have Sunday service on a lot of routes. On Saturdays, making 60-minute service 30 minutes, things like that are included in that optimal plan. And then increasing frequency would require additional bus purchases, so that's up here on the capital side. It may also, if we increased dramatically, require us to have a satellite maintenance facility to service some of those increase in buses. Our electric bus charging infrastructure, now we're installing the in-route charger out at the lay-by, but if we were to increase our fleet of electric buses by much more than is already scheduled, we would need some additional infrastructure here at our facility to do the overnight charging. And then we also have on here facility improvements and new intermodal centers. So Park Street needs to be basically replaced. So we have the Clearwater Intermodal Center. The MPO is doing a study about the Gateway area and in coordination with the DOT looking at where an intermodal center would be that's more centralized than Gateway Mall within this area. And then on the innovative project side, kind of one of our dreams, and it's not really available technology-wise yet, but we are actively talking to the technology providers, is to really integrate our apps so that there's less apps people have to go to in terms of fare payment, booking trips, doing trip planning. So that's on here. And then sustainability projects, we'd like to do some bigger projects like solar on the roofs, and those obviously require more funding to do. And that is all I have today. Happy to take any questions. I know Debbie's so happy that I'm acknowledging it costs money. She's smiling. Is that free, Debbie?
Thank you. Surprised we don't have more questions. I guess that's up to you. So this wish list, this unfunded list, do we have a dollar amount that would associated with that list?
Yes. It's large.
It's obviously how many zeros does it have?
It's large. I don't have the exact dollar amount off the top of my head, but
Okay.
I mean, it's significant. I mean, it's effectively doubling our bus network, and so our operating budget would increase pretty dramatically.
Okay. All right.
And then capital, just to give a scale, we're talking like maybe 25 million for an intermodal center. Express bus route would cost, a couple million for buses, plus the operating of about 4 million a year. So that's just kind of the scale of some of these projects.
Okay, and on the county level, I know we're coordinated with the Forward Pinellas.
Mm-hmm.
So these priority projects that are unfunded, that's on the list that the county's looking at as well. And
Yes.
factoring into their future transit
Yes, so
desires as well.
there's kind of multiple levels of the county list, but they do include, and this is very coordinated with Fort Pinellas, they do include things like the BRT or BRT Light on 34th Street. That would be the first phase. There's those 3 priority corridors you probably heard Whit talk about. So it includes those as like a phase 1. It includes the upgrades we would need technology-wise, and then maintaining our existing system.
So, I just wanted to find out, what are we doing to solicit for funding for these unfunded projects so that we can sort of anticipate the ability to implement some of these things in the not-too-distant future?
Well, we continue to pull from this list for grant opportunities for like bus and bus facilities grants, Lono grants. So we try that with basically every opportunity there is. We are also, like I said, closely coordinating with the MPO. And so part of that is making sure some of these projects are high on their priority lists so that as funding becomes available, we can fund them because they have to be on the MPO priority lists. And then in terms of the county conversation, we're not really leading that, but we're fully participating by providing projects and coordinating with Ford Pinellas. And then, but I mean, that's, I don't know what other approaches we could take at this time.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to get at is, number one, what's the probability of some of these things coming to fruition? But secondly, how are we prioritizing them so that even if they're all on the priorities list, it's a pretty long priorities list, so how are we prioritizing the priorities list so that we're hopefully can zero in on those things that are feasible?
Well, so in terms of the grant, we try to prioritize based on what the kind of flavor of funding is and what it can fund. There's very specific grants for innovative projects, for example. So it may not be our number one priority, but we could potentially fund it. So we would go after that. In terms of MPO funding, we look at maybe projects that are ready to go. We actually had a conversation with the MPO and DOT about this the other day. Cassandra has been coordinating on the regional level. So if we're talking about things like the Capital Investment Grant Program, at a regional level, we can't all submit the projects the same year. So we say, okay, which one's next? And make sure we're part of that conversation. On the MPO list, the Clearwater Beach to TIA is on that list. Some bus replacements, they're going to begin funding, I think it's 1.5 million for bus replacements starting in the new fifth year, I believe, or the current fifth year. But I don't really have a better answer for
All
you.
right, so we have people, you're on top of it. So.
Oh, yes.
As Heather said, the competitive grant opportunities, at least from the federal government, are very specific, in what they want. We had a sort of strategy meeting yesterday. I mean, Congress has really increased the amount of funding that they've provided into the low-no category for electric buses. So, I don't know, I'm probably totally jinxing by saying this, but I would say our best shot is to get some electric bus money, since we got zero out last year on that. And we're, the long shot that we're also applying for is a build grant. That will be very challenging to get for the Clearwater intermodal station to replace the dilapidated Park Street terminal.
Yeah, and then the operating priorities are harder because I'd say most of the federal grants do not allow for operating. It's capital. So that's really where that additional funding source becomes critical if we want to make frequency and span improvements.
Oh, and I think this is also, well, I don't know. I think any day they'll be announcing the innovative IMI grant winners, and we applied as a consortium with other transit systems for that integrated trip planning booking payment app with our partners at the Transit app. I think it was an awesomely winning idea, but we haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming we didn't win it. I don't know. I keep begging, telling anyone how great the project is. Anyway.
Commissioner Cox? Heather, can I get a copy of the draft transit plan? Can someone email that to me, please?
Yeah.
It should be it's in Granicus.
It's in here, but I mean, could I have it for my, okay, actually, I wouldn't have that at home yet. All right.
Well, it was just
Print it
provided
out?
to me this morning,
I might, yeah,
so it was uploaded
okay,
probably about 9:30 this morning.
Okay.
So it should be in there.
okay.
And that is the final draft. It's available for public comment, and so we could make some changes, but it's unlikely any substantial changes would be made.
For your heart?
All 149 pages of it?
Oh, there you go.
Does the
I want to share it with
the long-range plan include things like ferry service, aerial gondolas? I know there's been talk about different modes of transportation.
I am not sure if those two projects are in the long-range plan as, in terms of the MPO's plan. I know that they do show in their vision some potential rail service along the CSX lines. I believe there's maybe a ferry in there, but I'm not 100% sure. Cassandra's shaking her head yes. I don't think it includes aerial gondolas, but could. It's a long-range vision.
Well, that was really
Has
the,
gondolas
I don't
either.
think it does.
I think
I think it
waterborne transportation's in there.
Yeah.
so, yeah, and that was the real question, the fact that it's the long-range plan, is that it includes things that are really looking out past our, you know,
Right.
It's 10
being
years.
long-range.
Right.
And when we think of the world 10 years ago, it's a little different today. Any additional questions? Commissioner Rice?
I just had a quick question about the unfunded list, about the expanded shelter deployment. So our current funded shelter replacement plan is, jog my memory, but that's where PSTA matches what a city or county puts in?
We have both. So we do have some funding for a match program. And we also have shelters in our inventory that we are looking to deploy just as PSTA at high ridership stops. And this is where project management comes in to really help us get the easements and do permitting and do construction, because all the high ridership stops without shelters, there's a reason it doesn't have a shelter. It's not easy to do.
Okay,
But now we have more capacity on our staff to really look at those.
okay. But just to be clear, I mean, we do have, as part of our funded work, a certain base level
Yes.
amount of shelter replacement, but this is a more enhanced list.
Yes, this would be a much greater deployment, and there's also operating involved in this, because maintaining a shelter is actually a couple $1,000s a year. It's very expensive, and that's
Oh,
partly
the trash.
pressure washing, graffiti removal, any of those things, picking up cigarette butts. But, you know, so we try to not put shelters at places that have no ridership, because it's gonna cost us in the long run on the operating side. But there are benches we can put out as well, and I think we will be looking at additional benches now that we have less benches in the county, some of that.
Any additional questions? All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve the transit plan.
I'll make a motion to approve the transit plan.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And Debbie,
Yes.
the most
Excitement.
fun conversation. ever. Planning assumptions.
Thank you, Heather.
We'll be
You're
fine.
welcome. Debbie Lees, Chief Financial Officer. I'm going to be joined by Michael Hansen, our Finance Director, on a joint participation here for the presentation. This week kicks off with all of the spring training games that are kicking off this week, but it's also very important because we are kicking off our budget cycle here at PSTA. And over the next 6 months, we will be taking the budget and presenting to you different various aspects, culminating in 2 public hearings in the month of September. By June, you will have our first draft of the budget that we will be presenting to you. Over the summertime, we will refine that to bring forth to the public hearings. One of the things that we do here is we challenge the staff to ensure that what we're putting in the budget meets the mission and goals of the organization. Included in there is that we should be financially viable and financially stable. So what we do is take a look and try very hard to have a balanced budget going forward. We will be meeting with each of the directors and chiefs and their managers to go through where we are at today, where we project where we will be at the end of this fiscal year. And then when they ask for more or less items in the following year, we challenge them to say, you know, how is that helping the mission? What's different from year to year? Once we have this information, it really becomes a good basis for looking forward on a multi-year plan. And there's many advantages to having a multi-year plan. First of all, it gives you a very nice holistic picture of where we will be over the next 5 years. And included in that is assuming our long-term financial sustainability, and most importantly, the impact of the decisions we make today and what it has on the future. That is extremely important. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk about some of our revenue assumptions.
Good morning. So our three major sources of revenue here at PSTA are ad valorem taxes, passenger fares, and operating assistance from our federal, state, and local sources. So those three sources alone, those three categories actually make up 97% of the revenues we take in here to fund the services that we provide. So the first one of these is the largest source of revenue. It makes about 63% or $53 million in the fiscal year 20 budget, is that of property taxes. So our current ad valorem millage rate is at its cap at 0.75, and the assumptions we use in our 5-year plan were that of the county's assumptions. So in February each year, the county produces a budget assumptions document as well. So we use the same assumptions as they do. The one thing I'd point out in this 5-year projection here is the fiscal year 21. Last year, the projection was set at 4.5%. This year, it's at 5.5%. And that actually has a cumulative effect over the 5-year period of an increase of about $2.9 million over that 5 years.
What is the percentage? I'm sorry, is that like the?
The percentage growth between the budget and next year.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Markman?
Yeah, Mike, what's the reason we're going down to 4.5% in future years? Is that our projection, or is that something that's imposed on us?
That's the county's projection, and we typically use the projections that they use. So last year, all fiscal year 21 through 24 was 4.5. This year, they increased 21 to 5.5, and they have 22 to 25. They have 4.5.
Yeah, part of the reason they're maintaining it at a little bit lower level is Pinellas County is fairly built out. So we don't have the capacity for the new construction that some of our surrounding counties have. So that kind of tempers what the increase will be.
So we're relying, just to continue on what you're saying, then, we're relying essentially on revenue increases based on property value
values.
increases because we have no new property coming on board. Is that?
There's very little opportunity for that within Pinellas County.
Okay.
So next, we have passenger fares. In fiscal year 20, there was about $10 million of our budget, or about 12%. And the base fare is currently $225. We're currently in beta test of the Flamingo fare system. The public launch for phase 1 is planned in May. And while we assume that could cause a small decrease in passenger fares due to the fare capping policy, the fact that people will be able to cap and always pay the best fare on their monthly and daily passes, we think that at least in fiscal year 20 and 21, that would be made up by some of the overages we're seeing so far in this fiscal year. In the first 4 months, I think through January, we had about $164,000 surplus of passenger fares from budget to actual. So for the rest of the years going out, we're assuming a 0% increase in passenger fares. Next, we have our operating assistance, so our federal, state, and local grants. Makes up about 22% of our revenues, or $18.1 million in fiscal year 20. The first one, the FTA formula grants, we use some of those funds for preventative maintenance for Henry's team to be able to maintain our buses, about $5.5 million in fiscal year 20, and we assume that will remain constant from fiscal year 21 through 25. We also get state operating funds for block grants and route reimbursements. And the reason why you see the increase in fiscal year 22 to 24 and then the decrease in 25 is due to a service enhancement grant we anticipate we'll receive for the BRT project. So it's a 3-year grant. It'll be funded over those 3 years. And that's why you see the decrease there in fiscal year 25. So Debbie's going to talk about expenses.
Thank you, Michael. Our biggest expense categories are our salaries and our fringe benefits, accounting for about 61% of all expenses in the budget. We have a non-bargaining unit for our supervisors and one, or a bargaining unit for our supervisors and one for our bus operators. By the end of this fiscal year, the one for the supervisors will be expiring and a new contract will be negotiated. And by the end of next fiscal year of '21, the operators, which includes operators, CSRs, and mechanics, will need to be negotiated as well. We've made the assumption of a 3% increase for administration, as well as 3% increase for the top step in the bargaining units. One of the other key areas within there is fringe benefits. Of that, we've got health insurance primarily, as well as our pension costs. And health insurance, for those of you who have not been on the board a long time, we have seen some very large increases in health insurance in prior years. Occasionally, we've gotten up to 20 to 30% increases. Over the last few years, we've actually seen it with an emphasis on wellness coming down. Matter of fact, our average cost per claim of $950 is down 12% from the year before. So we're making some really good strides in there. In the past, we've anticipated about a 10% increase in health insurance. This year, we're bringing it down to about 7.5%, because that's the biggest piece of this. And if we were to renew today, based on our experience so far this year, knock on laminate, we would be more in the 5% range. This has a huge impact in a very positive way on our budget because of the volume of the costs associated with that. So hopefully we will continue to have a good year this year, and that can help keep our costs low. The other area that's a big cost for us is fuel. And we talked about this a little bit at the Finance Committee. Because of the coronavirus and the whole scare with everything, it's having a positive impact on diesel fuel prices. In the fiscal '20 budget, we are budgeted at $1.96 per gallon. I've locked in 2/3 of the price for this year of our usage at $1.88 average. And right now, to lock in for next year would be at roughly $1.58, $1.59. So the procurement department is looking into doing that. We currently, if we did 2/3 of our fuel usage for next year, it'd be at about 1.5 million gallons, which would have a savings in our budget of about $575,000.
I'm hearing on the news that Russia and Saudi Arabia are no longer going to participate in their price fixing, and that could result in further reductions, but we don't know what yet. But we're seeing gas prices now $2.05,
Yep.
and so I don't know how that translates in diesel, but the point is there could be further reductions, hopefully. And would we be able to lock in with that, or is that just a temporary spat between the different petroleum-producing people? And
There are, the whole OPEC is kind of cracking a bit.
Yeah.
And while they're cracking, we've also got a lot of fracking going on. So it's sort of a win-win that way, as well as the issues with the whole coronavirus.
Yeah.
So we can take advantage of that. I can lock in a portion of things now and lock additional in if we see it continue to go lower. One of the things that we did talk about earlier is being conscious of what our fuel usage is, so that we don't buy more than what we actually need in any particular month.
that piggybacks in then on another question. Is we increase our supply of electric buses, the cost of production of electricity hopefully will go down as well. And so is there a way to lock in electric prices the way we lock in diesel prices, or is that more complicated?
I've done it before. I don't know if Duke will do that, but what you can do is take a look at a normal course of a day. You've got a bell curve of when you're using, and you're paying an excess on the differential in the high part of the bell curve. So if you try to not lock in, but buy your electricity based on the usage, that way you're kind of locking in that, then you're not paying as big a differential.
So,
But I've never approached Duke.
yeah, well, are you saying that like overnight it's less So when our electric buses are charging overnight, that we'd be paying at a lower
We
rate?
would be paying at a lower rate overnight, but what you're ending up doing if you're not sort of pre-buying when you think you'll actually use it, then
It's
you're paying that
complicated.
big,
Yeah,
big
yeah. Okay.
differential.
All right, thank you.
We look at supplies, services, those are going up by the consumer price index. That consumer price index right now is at 2.2%. It's actually down from last year, so that will be helpful as well. And our DART, which is another huge expense, that contract will also be expiring next year, and we'll be renegotiating that. We've assumed approximately the 4% that we're seeing currently. That could go significantly up. I don't know that it will go down from there, quite honestly. Any input from Commissioner Cox?
I think you're right. It will likely go.
So are there any questions?
Okay, so do we, and I've asked this in prior years, but this is kind of the base case. This is what we're, based on numbers that are being given to us by other agencies and our experience, what we're looking at going forward. Do we ever create I don't want to say worst case, but variations of that base case showing better economic conditions, worse economic conditions, those sorts of things to get a sense as to where the range of possibilities might be?
We have in the past done that. For example, when there was property tax, I forgot something was happening with property tax that had a couple $1 million effect on us or potential effect on us. So we're constantly, I think Michael's got 1 million variations of our 5-year plan that we constantly update. But we can certainly take a look at that, positive, negative, and sort of where we're at based on these assumptions, and these assumptions get worked on throughout the whole process.
Yeah, because I know at least for me, professionally, that's something that we normally do. It's, you have your base case, and then you're spreading things around as to what are the chances of it happening one way or the other. Because no 5-year, I can guarantee you this 5-year plan is not what's going to happen. It is just the center of the hurricane path, right? It's not necessarily where the storm's going to go. It's going to be in a
That's a good way
range
of
of
saying it.
possibilities. So, in planning for the future, seeing that range can help us, inform us better to make better decisions now, based on what the possibilities of the range could be.
I would say, if you look at the county's forecasting document, which is on their website, that they do every January, they do have like a narratives analysis of what you're speaking about for each of the metrics that they track. I mean, the main one that we use is the property values of Pinellas County, and they do give a range on that. They say that they always try to conservatively estimate that. I mean, if you look at the percentage, 4.5% is a lot less than it has been growing. But even on the other ones, they do give sort of a range and or whatever you call, where you test what your assumptions were in the past and how accurate they were, and whether they modify their analysis of that. So we try to do the same thing.
It makes sense when trying to make, as you had said, a planning document and assumptions are there to guide us in making decisions today based on looking forward. And when we look forward, the world is a range of possibilities, not a singular possibility. And so seeing that range just helps us make better informed decisions today.
Okay.
I would say on the health insurance market, maybe this is cynical, but I feel like it's a singular range. Whatever Debbie puts on that chart, that's what Cigna's going to come back.
Well, then put 2%, and then,
I
and then
know.
that's what will happen.
That's what
We had 10% last year. It was a 4 because of Cigna's, acquired another business, and so we
Yeah.
were able to get advantage of that. And that's one of the things, I know you're new on our committee, we will bring forth a lot of these big ticket items throughout the next 6 months to have some very individual discussions on it, and it's usually in July that we'll talk about health insurance and have that contract renewed. We look at that contract every single year to keep the providers on their toes.
So the next step then is to take these assumptions and then apply them to the budget so that we start to see what our 5-year projected
Yes.
numbers start looking, okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Rice?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm trying to synthesize a lot of these different slides, and essentially, the snapshot that we see here, is it sustainable? Because it seems to me, I don't have a summary here, but it seems like our revenue is not keeping up with the expenditures.
That would be correct. Yeah, we're seeing things improve each year, and especially like a couple of the key indicators for next year are improving. So I think that, you know, going forward, we may get another year in there of having money left at the end of the year. But we are looking forward, and there are gaps in there, both on the operating side and on the capital side.
All right. Any additional questions? No? Debbie, thank you. Michael, thank you as well. Greg, future meeting subjects.
Well, I'm excited. We had a discussion when Heather was up there talking about the shelters.
Yes.
I hear from our planning department that's in the works for next month or the next month after that, a shelter deployment plan update.
Yes, Jacob was here, but he's gone. Yes, he'll be presenting that.
Yeah. To kind of go into a little bit more into detail on that, and we're also procuring a new shelter manufacturer, right now. I think we are. So,
In a few months.
what did you say?
It'll be in a few months.
Oh, okay, okay.
All right. Any other business? Any other items? No? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Steven says,
You were much better this time. It's a work in progress. Better behaved.
We don't have it yet, but we will be able to. Are they just the ones we're looking at?
No.
Okay, yeah. So,
Yes,
yeah, I have met with, oh gosh, remind me who the new planning